No, it's impressive.
No,
It is impressive.
You know, we could bring knives into the council chamber like that. No,
what?
I didn't know we could bring knives into the council.
Sophie?
He's on the list. that
No,
can't
thank
do
you,
it.
but thank you for offering. And yeah, we'll give you a pass on the next meeting.
Apparently there's a state preemption that doesn't allow us to ban things, so.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
That's
you can, you know.
not surprising,
Yeah.
but I mean, given the power of certain lobbies in the state, not surprising. But,
Mitch, would you like any banana bread? Eat?
He bought the whole pan.
I post.
I brought some
Are
to
we
share.
all set with being able to hear? Hey, Sarah.
it's there.
You ready for picture day?
She said some.
Rob has rehearsal, so go ahead and sit wherever you like.
Sammy.
Good, how you doing?
Good. Sorry, lady.
So, Sophie, are we good? You go? Okay.
You were good to go. Let me. Yep. We are. We're recording, we're live, and you should have the. You're good.
Okay, great. So let's call the Monday, October 30th, Orono Town Council Committee and Special Town Council meetings to order. Roll call shows Councilors Berthasol, Powers, Kenny, Demerit, Marks, myself, Councilor Wingard, our president, Councilor Laraway will be joining us in a little while. It's a little unprecedented, but I'd like to open our meeting by taking just a short moment of silence in memory of the events that occurred in Lewiston last weekend. Thank you. Okay. Okay, we have a few items in finance and operations on our agenda this evening. Council chair and town manager reports and public comment before we move into our special town council meeting. So we'll begin. All right, first item of business, economic development action plan. Staff, okay, Sophie, I'm sorry. Or Leo. This is-
Yeah, Finance and Operation Committee. The idea, I think, is that we're gonna try to, these are gonna be somewhat abbreviated, and I'm gonna ask, I guess, Sophie, what the outcomes are gonna be, because some of this is maybe a little bit longer, like the internal controls manual, I don't know what the final outcome's gonna be, but we'll start with the economic development action plan.
Sure. So this is a request from a representative of Orono Economic Development Corporation who is working to try to expand our special area management plan program, which is an overlay in the designated growth area. So kind of think this side of 95. That allows us to allow projects to build in over some wetlands of less significance in while trading that for larger areas of land outside of the growth area. So this is something that went through years of development through DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. We have people who are going to be coming back. OEDC is planning to come back to council at some point to do a little bit of education about that program. Because as the program currently sits, it does not entice developers to utilize it. And for a lot of reasons, we would much prefer to have people increasing density within the designated growth area as opposed to building subdivisions outside of that area. The critters would certainly appreciate that. So in order for them to really take this on as a project, it has to tie into the bylaws of OEDC or the town's economic development action plan or priorities. So what I did, I didn't do a lot of it, but Mitch and I sat down and really looked at what are the things that frame the work that is prioritized in the economic development department, what our priorities are based on the comp plan and other work that has been done. And this is currently what frames what we do and how we prioritize Mitch's time, not in I would say the first 2, 3 items are most definitely in order. After that, they're all kind of the same priority. But the idea being they needed a document supported by council that would be priorities. And so if council in the future wants to create wants to create a different set of priorities or prioritize differently, I think you can. At this moment in time, what they need is us to say that it is in our plan and our priorities to support workforce housing, which becomes the basis for trying to work with a bunch of people who are retiring, who pulled the SAMP together to try to make some adjustments that will make it more usable. Is that a long-winded way to say we're just trying to cross a T here?
Is this ever been approved in this format by council, these 10?
And this, we don't approve this meeting anyway, right? This is just to take a look. Do we see
Yeah.
anything out of line?
And
or
if
anything
this works, then this is more of a document that the department would just give them and say, here's what the economic development plan, this is what we're working on.
But we would be asked to approve it at our November meeting as like an order, or?
I probably wouldn't. I
Okay.
probably would just give this to Jeff and say, here it is.
Okay. I would think, since we have it in front of us, understanding it's crossing a T, but just, because it's in front of us and we're having a discussion, I'm interested on I think the high-speed internet piece is very important, and I'd like to see us add, if not here in this document, I'd like to see it in this document if we could do it, but whenever we turn our attention to this again, I think we need to ask our economic development department to help us think through how we achieve equity and access to high-speed internet in Orono for those residents who haven't been able to get access to fiber. So for remote work and education. So I think that should be something that we prioritize as part of our economic development work too, but.
We would need to get into defining broadband and high speed, and because fiber is one thing. I think we need to understand what the coverage is currently, I think,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Which I don't know that. Yeah. But I think I'd be cautious to say fiber, running fiber. I mean, it's broadband is what you're after is access, right? It's not.
Fiber is future-proof in terms of, symmetric upspeed, upload and download. And I know this isn't a fiber conversation, but I would just, I would advocate for fiber, but at the same time, I'm happy to talk about it when we open up that can of worms, so.
I think you've got the comp plan coming right around the corner, and adding fiber in this community would be a huge price tag. And I'm not saying it can't be done, but it seems like you might want to understand the costs associated with that, what the coverage currently is, and how it might be deployed in amongst the other priorities that council has. So right now, and what has been our marching orders thus far has been internet, the ability, not dial-up, but reliable and affordable. And when we talked about using the $250,000 that was supposed to be the match to leverage more money, more expansion for OTO fiber before they reached the deal with Otelco, which got it all for no additional tax dollars, what we were looking to leverage. That was gonna cost us almost, well, it was gonna cost us $250,000 that to get not even a mile of fiber out back.
Yeah.
And the answer we got is you're not gonna leverage private sector to do that because the density is not there to support the infrastructure investment. So I think it would be part of a bigger conversation, I would think.
Yeah.
And I do think that that should be a part of your comprehensive plan discussion when you talk about infrastructure.
I'd like to see. Whether it's in that role or, I mean, I'd like to see it somewhere under the umbrella of economic development that it's something that we're. Leading the conversation, but that's my take on it.
So economic development is about creating the environment, infrastructure and other things to allow for development. So I mean, I think we're probably talking the same language with just a different nuance.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Sure. I was just gonna say, I think this document looks good and I support helping the SAMP program move forward by making sure we can partner with them on this. So looks good to go for me. I'm not opposed at all to changing that bullet point 7 kind of as Dan was talking about. If we could just tweak it to expanding the availability and equity of reliable and affordable internet would be a really easy way to insert that value into that. And I'd support that as well.
I have one question on this also, it's a different question. My question was just, I can see that it's embedded a bit in some of this about talking about really supporting our certain walkable growth area, but I was also just aware, we don't sort of explicitly say anything about making sure that development is like environmentally sustainable into the future. Is that something that is easy to put in, or has it been part of the work all the time? Or it jumped out at me that it wasn't explicitly there, and I wondered if we wanted it to be.
It is in the comp plan document.
Right, and so maybe that's also a comp plan thing, but I just wanted to ask.
A lot of that stuff would be addressed in land use
Yeah.
things as well. So I think that's probably a more appropriate one. Then a lot of this already came out of the old comprehensive plan. So as you go through that, I think there's gonna be opportunities to look at new directions and things like that that shape those.
I know you guys are doing it anyway, but I just wanted to ask about that. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, general nod.
I mean, I do think that supporting sort of environmentally sustainable development fits well within the purview of what the SAMP program is trying to do. And so it might not hurt to put that as something that we explicitly value as a council in this document for that, if it's something that we do.
So does
explicitly.
walkable.
And walkable as well, yeah, which I think is in here somewhere.
Yeah, walkables in here.
Yeah.
So let me just get this straight, since I'm the one who's not been around for a while. There was a plan put in place so that we could build houses between I-95 and here. And part of it was the plan so that we could be on wetlands that has never been done before in the state of Maine. That's my understanding, right?
So this is a pilot project that
Yeah.
Topsom and Orono were invited to create. They, there was a group of very dedicated volunteers, community volunteers, who went out and mapped wetlands on people's property who were interested in having them mapped. A lot of work was done with a stakeholder group that included developers, environmental people, biologists, the state, DEP. And what they concluded was under state law, what they put as limits for development around wetlands is really not supporting true growth and migration of the creatures and the environment that wetlands support. And so it was much better for the ecosystem to have larger contiguous areas for those animals and creatures. Evan always called them the critters,
Yeah.
so, to be able to, grow and migrate to and migrate out of.
So my understanding is that's in place, developers could, if they wanted to develop those areas, but you're saying it's not enticing enough for them?
It's, so what the hard
Is
part
it- what's the-
is, yeah, I think
where are
what-
we Yanging to this.
so what Jeff is trying to do is to get OEDC
Okay.
and the town to partner to be able to do a model project where we would say, within this area, we are going to conserve area, land, all banked and ready to go for somebody who wants to do development in the designated growth area. It would take a change of, my understanding is it would take working with the Army Corps and some others to change the program. But Topsom has actually gone through this and had developers back out because it's just too much time to be able to go through the whole program. So they want to try to change it a little bit to make either the fees actually work enough to be able to buy land, or to make it more user friendly for the land, to use the process. So OEDC would kind of step in and be the entity. What Jeff would like to do is to get to the point where OEDC is stepping in and kind of performing that holder
Initial.
of the land.
Okay,
Yeah,
that makes sense. All right, sorry, thank you for clarifying.
yeah. So in order to do that, you're gonna get
Yeah.
a lot more education. Aram
Yep.
is gonna come with Jeff to do education piece for you. I'm gonna ask you about that during the managers.
And just to clarify, this is former town council chair Jeff Gordon.
Yes,
Yeah,
Not
there's a lot
Jeff
of, there's a lot of Jeffs.
I have a lot of Jeffs.
Good,
I'm good, sorry, thank you.
good.
Thank you.
The next one is the Town of Orono Code of Ordinance Revision, Chapter 2, Administration, Article 5, Finance, Division 2, Purchasing. I guess I'm gonna hand this to Sophie, but I guess, what are we looking to get out of this discussion tonight?
So we have gone, this ordinance amendment was worked through the previous council. This will be the third time it's been on an agenda for this council. The hope is that we would be able to move this forward to public hearing and adoption so that along with the internal controls manual, so that our practice will match our policy. And also, so you're increasing the amount of money that department heads can purchase can spend without a purchase order, and the manager can spend without coming to council. So it will simplify that process, but most importantly, it will align our purchasing in a way that we are following it, which we're not always following it right now because it requires an RFP for anything over $5,000, and we haven't been doing that. And because it's not an effective or efficient use of time to RFP things at that level. That's a lot of work, and we don't have, I think my suggestion was you could put in a purchasing department, or we could change the internal controls manual. And it would seem to me that especially as you're hiring new people and asking department heads to step up and function a little bit more autonomously, that you would want a document that they know they are required to follow to the T, which is not what we have been doing.
Okay. So I guess I'll open it up.
I'm interested in passing on this discussion for tonight so we can get to the agenda items we have about our search. And for a couple of reasons. One, I think that's something we should prioritize. We talked about putting the search items at the top of the agenda at our last meeting. And I think frankly, we ought to have this sort of internal control and updates to the ordinances with our new town manager. Is the types of things that we start turning our attention to with our new leadership. That's right, man, and I appreciate Sophie and trying to, button some of these things up on her way out as she's talked about doing with us, but that's where I come down on it. I'd like to spend our time tonight talking first about the search. If there's time to talk about it at the end, I suppose we could do that too, but and I also think when we do turn our attention to this ordinance and change the ordinance, I think we also need to discuss limits on authority to settle matters and things like that we've discussed, that I brought forward at several meetings, and it hasn't wound its way onto an agenda yet, and that has to be a part of this discussion too.
I would say, Dan, that I think that is an important discussion to have. Doing this fix right now doesn't preclude having that discussion later. So for me, this is the third time we've seen it. I would like to give Sophie the nod to go ahead because it provides stability to the department heads and directors who are here through the transition. And then we can always revisit it and we can always make an addendum to it. But for me, I don't want to go into a transition period where the people who are leading our staff through the transition don't have clear guidelines. So
I'm willing to be convinced by counselors that if this is a quick and easy fix, that we can do it. I'd rather not spend, and I'm willing to be convinced to vote for it if it's on the November agenda, if counselors feel like if other counselors who've spent more time with this than I have, feel we need to do it, but
That's how I looked at it, I guess, how Jeff did, in that I think like we have an interim coming in and then another hopefully and then a full-time coming in. I think the document needs to exist, not in all red marked up format. So I think I actually think we need to discuss if we have any concerns or changes or thoughts on it, which I do have one, but I think it makes sense to have it in place. Like she's saying, okay, we've been operating different than this, but they all kind of know it. Now she's gonna be gone. You've got someone new coming in, and when that person looks and says, wait, what are we doing? Like, oh no, we always do it this way. I think it's gonna be how that goes. And I don't think we want to put a new person in that position of, oh, that's how we always do it. So if we solidify this, then again, it's not a dead document. We can certainly look at it and determine if other changes can be made. But I think it should be in place for the incoming people, to be honest. That's my take. But I'm with you. Let's try and go through it here. It's the third time we've seen it. And we should, I don't want to spend a lot of time, so.
Yeah, that's, I think, where I'm stuck. I would like to get to the interim discussion really quickly, and I do still have some questions, and I brought some of them up before, and I appreciated the documents that came back, but I still have some questions, so I'm not sure for me that it's just yes, it's good to go, let's move as it is. So I'm concerned about time. So I don't know, is there a compromise position is I guess what I'm asking, like, is there a compromise that the amount that people have to ask for permission to buy is adjusted immediately and the rest holds until we can have a more detailed discussion, or?
So we're right now, we're talking about
is it
chapter 2.
documents, right?
Yeah, we're talking about chapter 2. The internal controls, I mean, I think there are pieces in there that I agree that there are still in red and says needs to be updated or fleshed out or whatever. So that is a little more squishy, I think, but I'm wondering if we can do this chapter 2 piece.
The purchasing ordinance I've seen a couple times and feel good with moving ahead with those changes. But don't want to rush other counselors on the internal controls if that's, and if it makes sense to do those things together, then I guess I would really welcome your thoughts about.
So they have to go together.
They have to, okay.
And there might be elements that in the internal controls, like, for example, I took out the cybersecurity and said, we'll just do a standalone policy for that later. You can do that later on. But a lot of the changes to the internal controls manual were about that. And I just want to go back because there's been a couple of times of, we want to get to this fast. I understand that, and I understand you want to do a workshop, but I also understand that Rob wasn't going to be able to be here right away and wanted to be part of that as well. So I am trying to be sensitive to what I'm hearing from council. And it would seem to me that we punted this twice. And this is something that staff really needs, because every time staff doesn't follow the policy, if council didn't like it, I was here to say, it's my bad, I'll do it. So you are going to absolutely hamstring the department heads if we don't make those changes to align at least with the purchasing policy and the way we're actually doing business.
So can we? Cause chapter 2, I actually, we're going from 5,000 to 50,000 on the proposed language, right? For-
That's for council.
What's that?
That's only for council's permission.
Right, meaning right now you have to come to council if it's over 5, we're changing that to over 50.
No,
Good job, Leo. All right,
let me open it.
how did I goof that up?
So it's saying,
Page 6, right?
yep, because this purchasing, the purchasing ordinance does not give the detail on the split between council and staff the way the internal controls manual does. So just trying to get to that place, Leo. You have a,
It's page 6. Small purchases, general. Any contract not exceeding 5,000 may be made in accordance with the small purchase procedure authorized in the section. Contract requirements shall not be artificially divided so as to constitute small purchase in the section. And this is proposing we go from 5,000 to 50,000.
yeah,
For small
and
purchase.
so, it says, so that's just a small purchase as opposed to a larger purchase, which has a whole, that has a whole other process. We're talking about process, not who makes what decision. So if it's a small purchase over $2,500, it requires 3 quotes or estimates. If it is, and that would go.
Yeah.
And then if it is. So you can use quotes. From 2,500 all the way up to 50,000. But if it's over 7,500 by the internal controls manual, it would come to council.
It's over what?
7,500 from the 5,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was a number that this group
Yeah.
gave
Yeah,
me.
okay, that, I was reading that the other way, so I
No,
was
this
not
is,
interpreting that properly.
so the ordinance does not establish department heads can spend this much, town manager can spend this much, council, that's in the internal controls.
Okay, all right, then, that's the only question I have with that one, personally, and I don't know if anyone else has any specific issues or,
The typo is still on page 9, I think, in the version you sent out, Sophie. It's double language at the bottom of page 9. Town treasurer shall have certified has confirmed. You see where I am in the red?
A,
Yeah.
Yep,
That's
okay.
just a language thing to grab.
so any other thoughts or questions or anything on the ordinance?
Is this gonna be in the November board meeting, November meeting? Is that the
Yep.
plan?
Okay,
I
And
mean, I assume that you would want me to be able to speak to it since I'm the one that has overseen this one.
all right, so we'll, I guess. We're giving the nod on that. Now you're saying now we can talk, I think, about the controls, internal controls manual.
I'm not committed to voting for it, so I'm gonna, I'll have to look at it deeply and
The internal control manual.
the ordinance. And if we do discuss the ordinance, we may want to talk about amending it to include the controls that I've talked about for months around settlement matters and harassment matters. Just to give people a heads up.
yeah,
You put it on the
yeah,
agenda if you want
yeah.
to put it on the agenda, but
Yeah.
I might urge the council to amend it at the time of the meeting include that control that I've been asking for.
Yeah.
For
So,
June.
so just to be clear, you can do whatever you want, but that control is already functionally in place with the insurance company. After you raised your concern,
Mhm.
before council decided how it wanted to manage it, I informed the insurance company and copied the council chair that the town of Orono had changed its authorities and the town council would need to sign off on employee-related insurance settlements. So it's not like people haven't been listening. It's about how do you find the way and the time and the avenue to do
I don't know
it
that I
without-
saw that email, so it wasn't a matter of me listening as opposed to not getting it.
And I think also though, I think there was some concerns raised about bringing that publicly and us weighing in. I think, I mean, I definitely don't think we would jam something like that in here. I mean, I definitely would not without vetting it through our attorney and understanding, well, again, whether it's the call to the insurance company saying something has to happen. I mean,
But I mean, Sophie just told us she's changed the policy.
no,
Without-
she didn't change the policy. She's advised insurance company
Yeah.
that if this comes up, the council wants to be appraised.
Maybe we all need to see that email and then we can, make an assessment from there, but at the
Can
same
we
time.
include that in the background, Ben, for if we put this on the agenda to move forward, we should include that in the background, then we can always have that broader ranging discussion if something needs to be
So
amended or tabled or something like that.
I just have one question about that. Yeah, we'll see it, but our town council is gonna turn over at some point, and at some point, we're gonna be back in the same point. Unless there's something codified, me personally, unless something is there and says this is how it is, so that the next people come around and we have new,
So I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting that you don't do whatever you
Yeah.
want to do. I'm suggesting that the language that was originally proposed had so many unintended consequences that it would have stopped a lot of our HR practices. My understanding is that it is claims around employment actions, not workers' comp claims, unemployment claims, liability, insurance liability claims, any of that. So all I've done is should have given council the comfort that the desire that was articulated was met. And I copied, I think, the council chair and maybe the vice chair on that email.
Yeah, I'm
So
not,
I would suggest you all do it. I would also suggest I am not the person to walk you through that.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense.
So we're talking about the manual now. Hopefully everyone.
Yeah, and I would say if we end up, at the point in time when Rob comes in, I would sort of second Dan's request that we do make the workshop this evening something of a focus. And so hopefully we can get through and answer a lot of the questions that people have on this in the intervening time. But I also would rather make the sort of manager search and conversations around that a priority tonight as opposed to these documents personally. So just wanted to say that.
I'm gonna just go first with one question, if you
Great.
don't mind, just because I think Sarah has a lot more.
No, I don't think I have a lot.
All right. On page 15, I'm tax acquired property. Reduce the number of payments accepted from the current owner from 3 down to 2 payments, and I guess I was just curious what the rationale to shrinking this is, because that obviously makes it harder for someone to get their property back than 3 payments and.
So that allows for a deposit and 2 payments without the town giving up its legal rights under the state law. So under state law, if we accept more than 3 total payments, we give up our automatic foreclosure process, and we then have to use the same process as a bank, which is super onerous. So when
Okay.
I've worked with people in the past, what we work on is, can you go to UCU or someplace like that and set up an account, to put certain amount of money in each week or each month? And so it allows for a down payment, which could be a lot of money or a little money, depending on the circumstance. And then, 2 more payments.
Okay, all right, like I said, I didn't
Those are
didn't
good
like the look
questions.
of it because it seems like it's counter to us wanting to give people their property back, but. There's a reason behind it. I figured there was, so that's all, that's what I had on the internal controls, so. Others?
Mine's on page 7. On the bottom half where we're under assignment of authority and responsibility. This is the part I brought up before, and I noticed, Sophie, that it looks like you did take the
I took the
assessor
assessor
out of
out.
the list because
Yep.
that I was correct, right?
Yep,
That
you
that
were
was not
correct.
legal with the
Yep.
state statute. Okay, great. I just wanted to maybe amend this a bit further. I wanted to first explain why and then, so my understanding here is we're looking in the second paragraph about some things that we might put in place when we need to, but that probably aren't like our ideal financial controls, right? Would involve ideally, the town manager would be another level of supervision kind of above the finance director or the treasurer, those other roles when we can. Is that right? And that this would be like a backup plan, kind of like when we can't, because we don't want to spend extra money to bring someone in, but it isn't like the ideal would be you're the top layer above these other positions, correct?
That would be ideal,
right.
however,
Not always
Given-
possible.
well,
Right.
I mean, I think it's about council priorities, Sarah.
Right. I just was wondering if we could just put the language to make it 2 things, maybe just to say on the red part, something at the beginning like, if needed, the town manager may, or, when necessary, some way that indicates that it's not our first choice, but that it is something we can do when we need to. If people feel good about that, and likewise, where it says the town manager appoints these other positions, town clerk, treasurer, tax collector, town assessor, and department heads. I was wondering if we could put subject to the annual confirmation of the town council, because I believe we do it annually anyway. We don't, okay, it just would be a reminder that if we get into a situation where we do have our town manager beginning to serve in multiple roles, I think it would be important to annually double check that and keep making sure that we actually need to keep doing it. And that there isn't our first choice option isn't there. If we don't have a way to check it annually, I just wonder if we will continue to remind ourselves to double check if we have our best possible practices in place. So those are my 2 suggestions, was just to add the word
I-
annual and then something about if needed or when necessary to the red section.
So I think if you put annual appointments of the clerk, treasurer, and tax collector, those are full-time employees that you're
Oh, so
now
that's not good.
making.
We don't want
for
that. Okay, take
annual,
that out.
which I think would
Yep,
send
take
a
that out.
ripple.
That is not what I meant, so take that out. But could we put something in the red part about, when necessary or when needed, or some way to indicate that that's not really our first choice, it's only when we have to? Does that work, Sophie?
You
I like
could
that.
put there, just understand that the charter doesn't have the if necessary language, but.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just want a reminder to us, because I know when I spoke with you once, you were indicating to me and explaining like our ideal practices and then, what we do, because we don't want to waste money or make things inconvenient or unworkable, but I want to remind us what our top goal is. Thanks. I think the only other question I had, Leo, was on page 11, and I think Sophie answered this the last time we had this discussion. Just wanted to scroll and take a look. Oh, it's not. Sophie, the last part above the cash drawer, this is the part you explained to us before, right? That these are systems you put in place to try to figure out what to do when you're not in the ideal situation, correct? And if you're needing, the town manager is needing to do the reconciliation work,
Yes.
you want to have both somebody from the council and the assistant town manager there. But I'm realizing we don't have an assistant town manager right
Or
now.
designee.
So the designee is the town, a designee in place of the council chair or in place of the assistant town manager?
So if we added an S, it could be either one, but the idea being. I mean, you keep kind of going up the chain when you have to do reconciliations, and if you get to the top of the chain. that somebody from council needs to look at that.
Although
So-
we don't have much financial expertise, and so that was why you had the assistant town manager there who understood the system.
Yep.
I was curious, who else might that be at that point, who would understand the system? Is that our senior accountant, or like, who would that person be? That would
Well,
actually
the
understand
senior,
that?
so the senior accountant is the one that normally does the initial reconciliation,
can't
so
be
it's
that.
probably I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I truly have no idea, and I think the other thing that we wanna do in here that I'm seeing, I've missed a couple finance managers, those would turn into finance directors because you are going to be appointing a finance director in November, I hope.
I hope so too. So this paragraph, if I'm understanding right, would tell us that the financial director would perform those monthly reconciliations with the town manager reviewing and approving the work. But if that wasn't possible and the town manager needed to do them, then we would have two designees who would be there. Is that how it would read at this? point?
Yeah, can you're gonna look at this next week, in 2 weeks, so why don't I just change that up a little bit and go back through and make sure my managers are directors.
Yeah, I just don't want to put us as, council either in a situation where we're being expected to financially check things we don't really know how to financially check. So I appreciate your taking the time, to make sure whatever staff members have the most expertise are able to be there. So I like your designee suggestion and anything else that you have for suggestions on that, because I think the financial controls are really important and you guys do a great job on them. And I want to be sure that we put in our manuals the really good checks and balances that you guys keep track of. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, I think that's really good, actually, because I think if it came to me,
Right,
I would designate Leo.
Right.
And if it came to a situation where it was a complex thing, then I would rely on our council to maybe seek some outside guidance, right? So giving us that.
I mean, I guess I would ask, so is there a potential for one of us to understand what this thing looks like? And if it's a matter of reconciling,
You're given two pieces of paper.
Yeah.
One that shows what the books say and the bank account.
Yeah.
And
reconciling.
and you just are checking to make sure that they're reconciled.
So I mean, I don't, so that, I mean, to that end, if it came to it, I think we could do it.
Yeah.
As a
And your finance,
third party, which is the whole point of it.
Yep.
and this is hopefully not gonna happen very often.
Right.
This is a
Yeah,
backup,
I'm not-
backup,
this
correct?
is
Does that
just to
understand correctly?
ensure we have
Just think it's a good thing
segregation
at all.
segregation of duties.
Yep. Thanks.
I just have a typo.
Oh, please.
Bottom of page 12, the red section just above the cash disbursements part, it says, financial transactions at the front desk, and it should say desk.
Okay.
Yep. Simple fix.
Am I good to do another one?
Sure.
Okay, on page 21, do we know what happened with the part that says it needs to be updated? That was yellow, but it doesn't show yellow here, I think anymore, but it's on page 21 with need to update this section under information backup. Are we gonna change that language somehow?
Sorry, where are you?
21, it used to be highlighted in yellow, now it's just under information backup.
Yeah, so,
You see that, Leo?
it does not need to be. It does not need to be anything more than automatic offsite backup.
Okay.
And if I got creative and wanted, I don't think we need to put in the Google, everybody knows that Google has its own platform, so I'm not, we don't have to back that up.
We can just take that language out.
But we would take historic accounting data from former software platforms are backed up to tape and maintained in a safety deposit box. That's not. We have changed that to paper and stored it offsite.
Okay,
Yeah, that was one of the sections. That's why I wasn't sure. It says need to update this
Yep.
section. Was
No,
what was in
that-
there for.
I just need to take that out.
okay. And you did the same thing you said under the information systems back on page
Yep.
9.
Yep, I talked with our IT vendor and we will you can all do a cybersecurity policy and they can decide at that point if it needs to come to council or not.
So just so I'm clear on what you just said. Where do we are you gonna reference still historic accounting data and where it is or not?
Probably not. Because we're so far beyond that historical accounting data that we're not required to keep it.
Like 7 years, is that the?
And is this a document that will also come back to us then in November for its final vote?
It needs to be adopted at the same time, so they align.
And you'll email that out to us with these changes, so we have one more chance to look. That's great. I think that's all the questions I had.
Anybody else have any other thoughts, questions? Right? So just again, so we're clear, you are gonna come back with these two documents in a format that we can either decide to approve or not approve in November. Is that-
Yeah, I was thinking the November council meeting.
We have to have a hearing on that too, we do, right? Public hearings.
Public hearing,
I think
thought we already called it last
Okay,
in October, I think we called it. And if we didn't, then we'll set it up for to call a public hearing and you can adopt it in December.
Yep.
But that's you've only got 2 weeks of.
I am gonna move my fiscal control matter that I raised by email. I'm gonna, Sophie, if you've got thoughts on how it could be tightened. I'm happy to look at them, but I'd like to have it part of the discussion. If we're gonna adopt changes, so.
While we're, I guess, talking about it, what is it? I guess, what are you trying to accomplish? So I think it's based on a recent thing that happened. That happened through insurance and all of that.
Yep.
They came to a resolve. You're just suggesting that they can't come to a conclusion or come to an agreement. That agreement is gonna be pending on coming back to council, even if it's below that.
Even if it's below $5,000, I think the council should have the final word on any matter, any settlement matter that the town of Orono, we're the governing body of Orono. I think the town council ought to have the final word on any agreement that the town of Orono enters into resolving a personnel matter. I mean, it doesn't have to be an unemployment case, or it doesn't have to be necessarily a workers' comp case. But if there's a personnel matter involving one of our staff or a matter of discrimination or harassment brought against the town, that insurance would cover, even, with a.
An agreement has been worked out.
The agreement's been worked out, and council should still have the final. We're the elected officials of the people of Orono, and I think the council ought to have the final word on it.
I guess I don't think we should be inserting ourselves in that kind of operational level personally, but I hear you, I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
And I think there are probably gonna be legal ramifications to doing that, but.
So maybe can I suggest that when we get the document that we're gonna look at in November, and we have some language in front of us, and then you bring in language that you may want to add or amend.
Okay.
We'll have that discussion, because I do want to be, I don't want our discussion of this revision to be super free ranging and taken out.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
Jeff, I have a question on.
And are we waiting for Rob to get
No,
here?
we're not.
Oh, okay, okay.
I don't,
I'm just trying to fill time here.
You can do a little.
Get a little dog and pony, Dan and Leo show, yeah.
My only question was, because we do think that there's potentially legal issues with language. Can we just authorize as a council now that whatever language Dan comes up with gets sent to the lawyer before November? So it's been looked at and we know what the legal questions are, and it's not another delay in that process if Sophie needs to.
Well, haven't we already had some conversations with our lawyers on this language?
No,
I talked to the town attorney to make sure that what I was thinking was correct, and again, I come back to. We have got a short period of time. I have 5 more weeks here. I have a laundry list of things that I have to do. I have put a stopgap in place that employment practices claims can only be signed off on by the town council with the insurance company, and I have confirmation from the insurance company that they agree with that. You are changing a practice that council had for years, which is up to you. But I'm kind of getting sick of being made to feel like I've done something wrong.
I don't
Number one.
think that's, okay, I
Number
don't,
two, I would also say your stopgap has been fixed. You can amend an ordinance anytime you want, and I guess I question why you want me to spend my time on that when 6 weeks from now you can have somebody else do it.
Yeah. okay, I'm not suggesting that there's any implication in here other than my interest in moving our schedule forward. However, I want to honor every counselor's sort of prerogative to amend our work as we see fit. So what I'd like to suggest is that in our November meeting, we address this, we allow Dan or any other counselor to bring language, and if that language seems to be something that the majority of council wants to go forward with, we'll address it at that time. So I don't want to negate what you're saying, Sarah, but I don't want to hold our process up. I think there's opportunity.
Yeah,
do
I
that work.
absolutely wasn't trying to hold it up. I was actually trying to do the reverse. I was
Right,
concerned that
right.
if Dan brings language and
But
we
I'm a-
want it, and then that holds up Sophie getting the policy passed that she needs, was
But
my concern.
I do think it's better that we have that discussion publicly rather than Dan sent us language and we all think it looks.
Oh,
good.
yeah,
So
no.
let's send it to the attorney. I think there is, makes sense having. this
Absolutely,
discussion.
the discussion
Yeah.
needs to be there. I guess I'm just concerned about Sophie's need to get something passed. If that bogs down getting this passed, then what happens?
Yeah.
But,
I will say, I'm supportive of getting the things that want to get passed. And I also like really value the democratic sentiment in Dan's suggestion that we take seriously this addition to it. And so I would commit to wanting to have more conversation and real thought about that. As a separate matter, if that's how it needs to be, but I don't want us to drop the ball on it, and we'll try to.
I've been
move
asking
forward
for it
with
since June,
Yeah,
so
it's
you know, we're able to
okay.
move, we're fast track, you know, it doesn't. Fast track's not the right word, but we're committed to getting this
Yeah.
done, something that I've been asking about in public
Yeah.
meetings since June, hasn't happened yet. I've been, and it's,
Yeah.
I would defend each of your rights to bring something forward like this.
Yeah.
And we'll vote on it. If it's 6-1 against,
Great.
then that's fine, and you know.
But will we be able to vote on language? This is my question that the lawyer hasn't seen. We won't. We'll just be able to say we want to then take it to the lawyer, correct?
I don't
That's what
think,
I'm
I'm ready
trying
to
to
vote on
understand.
language, so I
I
mean,
Okay.
mean,
if,
Well, so if we want to vote on language, I
can-
feel like there's.
I mean, we can take whatever action as a council we want to take. You may feel, or I may feel that it's ready to go, or that it needs further review. I mean, I guess that's part of our deliberation.
Yeah.
You know, and I like what Leo's sort of packaging of that is transparency is in and of itself really, really valuable. So having these discussions in as public a way as possible is really important. Expediency, as Sophie's explained, is also valuable because we only have a few more weeks with her. So however we strike that balance, we strike that balance. But I don't want to stop a conversation, but I also don't want to stop setting in place the processes that need to be in place
And
to get
I,
us from December to January.
and I would add that from expediency, we are gonna know if something like that is going on. So there's nothing that's gonna happen while we're sitting here at the table, right?
Right.
So, and that is in place. She's called the insurance company, they know that, but we all came in at the 11th, most of us came in at the 11th hour. I think council was fairly appraised of what was going on, and we knew what was going on with most of that stuff. It wasn't a day-to-day reporting, but we did, and we would certainly know enough to raise the hand and say, hey, hold on, we need to do something here. So I don't think the expediency is super critical that this has to happen, you know, with this revision. But certainly let's keep it at the forefront and have it discussed. So that's my thought.
And also, is the transparency discussion, isn't this language already read into the record from several past meetings where Dan read it in and we talked about it? So I mean, it has
Yeah,
been, the
it's-
language has already been shared out with the public.
looked
I
at
think
it, yeah.
it's
It's not-
Shared, I don't
I
think
don't,
we've
this has
discussed
not been shared with the public.
not the language,
Okay.
just the idea.
the
Okay.
idea.
So the language would be coming forth at
Request
the
has been
next.
shared several times.
Yeah.
The idea's been talked about. The language is in our inboxes, so.
My misunderstanding then. I thought the language had already gone out publicly.
So that's the end of me,
Okay,
my section, sorry.
Thank you, and I apologize for.
okay, so item number 4 is council chair and town manager reports. I want to get to the other parts of our meeting, so I will forego council chair, but we do have some town manager items.
I think the thing I need to know from this group is on my list of things to, my deliverables is whether, you are looking for me to do the annual audit report back, to council. And if you are, with some detail, so I provide more detail than the auditor does. And if you're looking for that, that's fine. I can do it. We have draft financials, so we could do it based on that. It might not be till after the new year that you get the beautiful bound covered ones, but these probably won't have change and we could go through that in a meeting. But I
think
just
that would
wanna
help.
know if you're willing to do the draft and have me do it. The other thing I can do is I can show Zach how I do that, which is kind of it's what we just did with the management discussion and analysis.
I think it'd be helpful to have that from you, given the circumstances of someone else just popping in here, so.
Agreed. I think it'd be great. And I think it'd be great to have Zach involved in it also, so he gets to learn from you personally. If you feel like you have the time.
Sounds fine to me. No strong feelings on my end.
Second. Okay, is there any public comment? Either in-house or online? Anything online?
Nothing online.
Okay, thank you. So, seeing none, I would take a motion to, oh, we don't need a motion to adjourn our committee's meeting, so with your permission, I would like to adjourn our committee's meeting and move into our, however it's phrased, special town council meeting. All those in favor? Good, yes.
So I would assume that I can run this meeting from my office and let you guys do this next part.
That would be excellent, thank you. Okay, so for the special town council meeting,
Will there be any public comment to this?
There is, I'll let you know.
she'll come in and eat herself in. So let's show roll call for the special town council meeting. It's Councilors Berthel Powers, Kenny Demerit, Marks, myself, Councilor Wingard. Councilor Laraway will be joining us as soon as he can get off. Our first item of business is workshop, planning and priorities for selecting an interim town manager. And we began to discuss this really briefly last time. I have some documents, pertaining to particular individuals that have been either shared with me or that Councilor Demerit and I were able to access from the Maine Municipal Association website that we can go over in more detail in our executive session. But before we hit that, I thought we should discuss in open session what our expectations are for an interim town manager. And the guidance that I've received from individuals at Maine Municipal Association is that interim town managers are normally part-time employees who are subcontracted to work for a particular number of hours per week. They, in general, carry forward the ongoing business of the town. They are often sort of self-selecting in the areas that they work in and in the hours that they're willing to work. So that all becomes part of the conversation for an interim. And that is, like I said, a subcontracting job, which is different than a manager's search, which is a more broad search. So I guess in a general sense, without pointing to any specific candidate, what would we all like to see from the ideal interim manager? How many days would we like to have that person work? What kind of responsibilities, scope of work would we expect an interim manager to work, that kind of thing?
Is 32 hours like way out there? Because I think 4 days a week, 8 hours a day, that gives them a weekend. like a 3-day weekend. I mean, that seems like a real, like, it's still part-time, but it's almost full-time, but.
It's a little bit more than I've been quoted,
Okay.
but we could
I'm
always
just-
negotiate, we could
because-
negotiate that, right?
Because our
Yeah.
Fridays are already not
Yeah.
as busy. I'm just throwing it out there as then they could be here kind of when, well, I mean, I'm sure the staff is here Friday anyways, they just don't have the thing open. So, I don't know. Just a shot in the dark from my end, but I think about 32 hours,
Up to 32 hours, kind of.
30 to 32 hours.
I said up to.
But that's what I was thinking.
I think, to me, less important than the exact number of hours per week is, somebody who's going to be sort of a good fit and a leadership presence that's gonna feel, sort of helpful and supportive to staff and, be helpful to us as we're working through this transition period. And I would be willing to have some flexibility around, if there's a person who seems really ideal, but doesn't want to work 32 hours. I don't want number of hours to be a barrier to us getting a really good candidate. So I'd make kind of what we're looking for primary and, as many hours as they can work secondary to that personally.
Does it make sense to talk about this in the context of the priorities that we worked on
Yeah.
last week in terms of?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I agree completely. I think I brought up last week that the hours to me are like, yeah, sure, ideally, we want the person who can do a lot of hours, but I don't think that's the only criteria out there. So I agree with Sonia that if somebody is better match for us, I'd rather have the better match with less hours than more hours of someone who doesn't seem like is good a match for us. So I think it's anytime you're hiring, there's a list of things you're looking for. In an ideal world, they'd be at 32 hours, but if they're not and they have other strengths that are, outweigh that, then they outweigh that.
So I like that idea that we're looking for somebody who can be helpful and a leader for staff, that can be supportive and helpful for town council, and then have this idea of a match. And so what is gonna be, it's not like we'll never find a perfect match, but what are the things that would match with our alignment or priorities or?
This is where Dan was bringing up his document,
I
right?
guess so,
So
yeah.
here we go.
In the document that it's gone around and I had it as approved based on, I guess, some edits that I incorporated a couple different times. So I have it down as approved in my file, but, and I don't know, Jeff, what the plan was to post it.
Is it posted?
It's not,
Is
it's
that
not
obviously,
posted yet, but we plan to post. I just
yeah, I get it. I mean, it's last week was,
items of last week.
yeah, Yep.
Have you shared out with us all the most recent version of it?
I believe I have.
Wait, that's not the service promise.
No, the service promise is a different document.
So which is this one called?
This is the statement on leadership transition, Orono Town Council, October 26, 2023. That's it.
Leadership statement.
Yeah. That's the one where I pulled the chicken in every pot
I see it.
reference for you.
Yeah.
Yep. I thought you said it was gonna, yeah, October 27th, correct?
Yeah, I really,
October 20.
7th?
Preview.
26th,
download.
it was the 26th.
Is it under transition message? Is that the?
Really need to, can't these things like,
There
you
it
have
is.
these things in open meeting and then it's hard to
Yep,
keep
right
everybody.
here. Do we want to print this for people who are here to see?
Yeah, but certainly can. Let me request it.
Or I can also just pass my laptop around if you all want to see.
Would you like to see?
It's a nice document, so here, this is a touch screen.
So,
Be
Jeff,
happy to have,
I don't
I'd be happy to have Matt read it into the record.
You send it to Mitch. Mitch can print it.
I
Mitch,
need
do
it.
you want
It's
Dan to
short.
send it to you? Dan can just send it to you.
So, yeah, so it says in shorthand, prioritizing services to Orono residents, valuing Orono municipal employees, continuity for community priorities, and open citizen engaged search.
Okay, well.
I think those are, for me, wonderful. I think the open citizen engaged search is most important for me for the full-time leadership. I think the interim is almost like, I don't know, I'm a teacher, so hiring a substitute teacher, you get somebody in who can manage the class, to hire the principal, you do a longer search, right?
But it is also true that the interim will be here during that process, and there will be a fair amount of stuff to coordinate with staff about announcements going out and all of that, I suppose. So it's important for them to know that that's a priority for us in that process, that all that information is clearly getting out to the broader community, right?
One of the priorities for me, I guess, would be having an interim who is committed and capable of doing good public communication.
Right, that's what I guess I'm saying, is that I think there will be a fair amount of public communication that needs to happen, and we luckily have a great communications person, but we want to be sure that the interim's aware that that's a priority.
Yeah,
There's managing staff, there's managing the operations, there's engaging with us. Do we put a higher priority on any of the, I mean, communication's important, but I think, you know, with someone that's here to not keep the lights on, but you know, that's someone that's filling in.
we have
We
a,
have to maybe support that a little more than like, you know, do we want this person to be the communications guru? Or do we want them to be the organizational guru?
Yeah.
Or really good with, I don't think really good with council is a high priority, to be honest.
I think it has to be high, it has to be, if their communication skills are not like what we would see as ideal, they have to be good at being with us, because then we are gonna take up the slack for communication, because we have to communicate what's going on here, and we have to communicate what the search is about, we have to communicate all those things, so then we become, and that's not a bad thing, but we have to be communication gurus, and we have to be able to say what thing, and so we need to be able to understand what's going on with the town. So that is like having a good working relationship is pretty
Yeah, and just
Pretty-
to, I
pretty high,
guess,
just because it's important. This is a really important 6 months.
To
and we
rephrase
want
maybe
to have everybody.
what I
be,
just
like,
said, I think
gung-ho.
those are all kind
Yeah.
of table stakes, like
Right.
we need all of that.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if we apply a weight in one direction.
Yeah,
And we-
I don't think we can wait it.
part of this, that we do have a communicator on the staff.
Right.
Pete, and there's, you know, we approved at our last discussion.
Yep.
Expanded role there, as I recall,
yeah.
and well, it's coming together that way as a, so that would be managing staff, be managing our communication staff. Who, so, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, to me, a management style that is really oriented toward facilitating and empowering department heads and, like, for example, the communicator on staff seems to me like it could be really helpful in this situation. And I imagine that most interim town managers are this way a little bit. They don't want to come in and sort of impose new structures on folks when they're here temporarily, but someone who's going to really support a department head who already knows and is good at their job in doing the job and sort of helping facilitate their success, it to me feels really important. And I think that skill set also is going to organically end up being really helpful for working with council on our priorities, sort of. So a manager who is really good at empowering leadership in others is, I think, like my number one thing I'd like to see.
I think that's particularly important since we're transitioning. Whoever's gonna
Yeah.
be, you know, sitting in the manager's office for, you know, 18 to 24 to 36 months during the transit, I'm kidding, but. Whoever's, whoever's gonna be our interim manager is not gonna be with us for long. And to the extent that department leaders and staff are able to communicate with the council and be able to, I think that's are empowered like that way, I think would be helpful.
What else should we? Maybe let's flip this and say, what would be a no-go for us if we had a candidate that looked qualified, that was available to work for us, that had a skill set that seemed to do this? Are there factors that we would not prefer? cabinet manager.
But we'll obviously need to peruse resumes and do background checks and stuff like that. And so, things would pop up as red flag. I don't even know if it's worth listing kind of the red flags that we look for. I guess we know them when we saw them, but I don't know that this is.
Yeah, I wasn't looking at personnel red flags. I was saying, what if we have a candidate who has worked primarily in small towns, primarily in rural areas, primarily in urban areas? Is there a kind of experience that we prioritize more or less?
I don't know if for me there is, I think for. I'm starting to feel a little bit like I need to see some resumes before I can continue on too much thinking through the pros and cons of a hypothetical for an interim specifically for the town manager in the long term. I think a more detailed visioning makes more sense. Is where I'm at on it.
Is there any upside or concern for someone who's essentially a professional interim? I mean, is that kind of what you see in some of these positions now? Is that like in higher ed, they have a thing called the registry, and you get to the end of your career and you get on the registry, and universities that are in a transition reach out to the enrollment management interim vice president of enrollment management, or dean of students, or presidents and things like that. So I think the record at UMaine and anywhere would be, sometimes those are really good fits for a temporary period of time. Other times they are, they haven't been as successful. Because there's like ownership and activism about a leadership position that I think is important. And so I guess I don't know that it's a mark one way or another. Because you just don't, you'll have to look back at how successful they've been in these roles. But
I'm with Sonia. I think because presumably the intern's gonna be a finite number of resumes we're gonna look at. I'd like to just look at them and discuss them. And I think that.
I'm really glad though that we had an opportunity to have a conversation about priorities, so that folks in the public and folks tuning in kind of got a chance to hear what we're thinking going into looking at some resumes. I think that transparency is really helpful.
And I think sort of similar to that, I feel like this most recent draft that came out about the service promise, which is what people thought Dan was talking about first and was not. Although I realize this isn't crucial, I think finishing this document ourselves so that the interim coming in knows, like, here's the things we've been working on for the last however many months since this council's been here. And here's the things we, continue to keep working on, is important for them to know about us. And so, I don't know if this isn't a draft that's ready to be looked at yet or not, but
I did you had 2 edits about the DEIB committee, and you had another one, environmental stewardship, that I haven't worked into the document yet, but other than
But the
that.
basics, are here. And again, if the public wants to see the basics of where we're at with this, I think that's
What's that one
great.
called again?
Promise.
And
You guys say
I
something
just
about
want to
that?
say, we're kicking around the idea of throwing, like, having a addendum document. This is still in the draft
Look
about
at
like,
specific projects.
Yes.
Yeah, I was hoping that was the
Yeah,
case.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
that's
different
not
things we're
been
working on
ignored.
fit.
and how it fits into those categories. And
Is this something else that we could like attach in an addendum for the public to see that there's a draft going about this at this point? Do we feel? I mean, I think we've had 2 people work on it, so that's a subcommittee. It's not a quorum of the board. I would like to say there's been a 2-person subcommittee working on this, but is it at that stage? I just want to be sure before we get to the interim hiring. I think this is a useful document for, someone coming in to work with us to see also about what have we been working on and what are we wanting to
One thing that
continue
we could
moving
do
forward.
is since any counselor can bring any document to whatever discussion, we can, even before it's approved and accepted by council, we can
Right.
consider it, right, as a contribution of an individual counselor to our conversation, and then we can put it on an upcoming agenda for acceptance, you know, and maybe that's a way we can use it in the short term and approve it, institutionalize it for the long term.
I think that would be great, because I think this is also a helpful document in the hiring process, both for the interim and for the long-term person, and I'm just grateful to Matt and to Dan for taking on that subcommittee thing to make that happen. It's work, so it's a work that's appreciated.
You did most of the work. I
You
just
did
turned in
most
the
of the work.
bumper stickers, So,
I changed a couple
Thank you, but
letters.
so Jeff, do you thinking on two different documents? We've approved the Orono leadership transition statement. And that's a communication item.
Yeah.
And that is certainly something that it's gonna be shared on the website, and we need to talk about how we're gonna communicate the search to the public, you know, like it's gotta be, in my opinion, I think it should be, careful not to be too assertive in these, I only get one or two really assertive moments per council meeting. But, so I think it ought to be, you know, one of those buttons, one of the 9 buttons in the front page of the website, you know, this is stay up to date on Orono search for a new manager. And so I think it goes there, and then the service promise, are you thinking, Jeff, that we bring it into the meeting as an order to approve at our November meeting? Okay, that'd be great.
I mean,
That meeting is 2
don't we
weeks from
bring it
now
in
still.
to discuss?
Yeah.
And,
How about we bring it in next week for
I
a
mean,
discussion?
yeah, public discussion before.
We have one more meeting coming up,
think,
right?
Right,
before-
this just feels, again,
Yeah, agreed.
I appreciate the effort
Agreed.
going on.
Yeah, we can have it
But
at
I
the,
think it should be
okay,
vetted publicly before we
Agreed.
just come forward and try to approve. And I'm not much of a process guy, so don't quote me, but I think that's normally how it would be done.
I mean, I think that's fine. We'll bring it into our next committee
Committee
meeting and then we can
Okay.
put it on the agenda.
I'll
Our
get
next
edits
committee
back.
Meeting is next Monday, correct? And our next full council meeting is the Monday after that. So that should work just great with the
Perfect.
time.
Sequence.
Good. So and I'm not trying to cut off this discussion, but I am trying to be mindful of our time and that we have an executive session to go into too. Are there other issues that we should talk about related to the interim process? Okay. Because then we're faced with this bigger process, right? The long-term search for a new permanent town manager. And I'd like to preface this by saying that it's a big job. It's one of the biggest jobs that ever faces a council. The last time that we did this in town was over a decade ago. And the processes for searching for a permanent town manager are more complex now than they were then, and they were quite complex a decade ago. So I haven't had this conversation with the whole council, but I did have the conversation with Leo and Sarah, just to let them know that I'm feeling super duper stretched, right? I'm feeling like there's a lot coming down the pike. I want to be a thoughtful facilitator for all that stuff, but I have my limitations. So I think it's important that we have some counselors who are focused on managing and directing town council search. So I've asked that Leo be sort of the steering person for council management, and then I looked around the council to see who didn't have a current subcommittee assignment, and that was Matt and Sarah. And if I just, in terms of longevity and people being here and I sort of asked if Leo and Sarah might be willing to lead an ad hoc search committee. So it's my hope that is okay. Maybe I should have processed this better. I know that we'll all do it, but if you already have a subcommittee, and I quite frankly, I just can't take on any more. I hope that everybody on council will be willing to participate in the process. I hope Leo and Sarah will be able to kind of shepherd that through. So it's sort of my organizational plan is to do it that way. That doesn't become a permanent committee of council, becomes an ad hoc committee of council, and I suspect we'll check in pretty regularly with them.
Leo and Sarah, are you both willing to do this? Thank you. Thank you.
We talked to each other. We said we'd lock arms and we could do it
All right, great.
And that is not to,
if you would like us to do it.
right, that's not to disinclude anybody else's voice. Really, it is just to say that,
Yeah, more the process stuff, I think, right? Then as far as there's no big.
That's just the start, right? You got
This-
I did bring a timeline, a potential timeline of what that might look like.
I'm so glad you're on this subcommittee. This is.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm on here. is
That's it.
people
Hang
know-
on, yeah.
Me, I asked Leo, he said, you do that.
Yeah.
So if people want to do, I could pass it around and we could take a quick look just at that now to see, because I think there are questions on here, but I think, I think it's important. And I think I brought enough copies, at least for a certain number of members of the public, if you give me one more else.
I will say the document that Brian McGill shared, if people had a chance to look at that was, I think, super helpful.
Yeah, it was.
So this is mostly based off that, but I put it into dates that would be like our actual meetings.
Mitch, do you want one?
And this is just a starting point, but I think one of the things that we need to do is to agree on the timeline, really ideally next week. Yeah, I think that's our first order of business, is to decide what timeline we're looking at. Because without that, it's pretty hard to plan much of anything. So I don't necessarily know if we even need to talk in much detail about this document tonight. I can certainly send the electronic version out, but I feel like at least looking at what I suggested for next week's meeting and whether we feel like we could accomplish those things next week. Because if we're not gonna kick off next week, we need to push everything out. I don't think there's much of a way to squeeze within this much, so.
I think, Sarah, one of the things, and I haven't looked through this, so maybe it's addressed in here and I don't know yet. One of the things that I'd like to just know going into the process is what level of assistance the council is going to look for from our partners. So there is some level of assistance that MMA, Maine Municipal, lends to towns without a fee. However, that's like the basement level, right? And that's not saying anything against MMA. They do a fine service, but the service that they provide is limited by their staff and resources. In the last search, and this was more than a decade ago, we contracted with Eaton Peabody to help us with the search. My understanding is that they provided a lot of the sort of behind the scenes management, logistic stuff. It was still incumbent upon the council to do a lot of the interpersonal work, right? Council had to meet multiple times to identify priorities. There was a lot that fell on a very small number of people. There are a number of firms that are professional search firms. And they cost more. They certainly cost more than MMA, which would essentially be, minimal cost. It would cost more than a company like Eaton Peabody, but they are set up to help do public surveys, to do council surveys, to help us prioritize our goals, in addition to doing the search stuff. So it would be really useful for me to, even if we haven't identified a firm, if we say, okay, we're going to do it all ourselves. We're going to go with the minimal MMA level of assistance. We're going to go with a firm like Eaton Peabody without, locking into Eaton Peabody, but a firm like that who has done some searches, or we're going to get the limousine search service because we think that's an important priority of the town, and we want to put our resources in doing a bigger search, a search that might in fact go beyond the boundaries of the state of Maine.
I agree. I think it's an important question. I'm willing to take on contacting some of those firms between now and the 6th if people want more information about what I can gather that might look like if we contract. I built this assuming that if we didn't contract, that was the most work for us. And so this was built saying, if we don't contract with a firm, how much work is that for us? And what does that look like? More than willing to contact the firms and get that information. I know we had positive comments from the public about the school process, which I think has happened 3 times in the last 10 years. And I did inquire there. They have never contracted. They have always run that themselves fully internally and seemed to get a lot of positive feedback from the community about how well that had gone and how involved people had felt. So I built this based on that only because of that positive feedback and because I think it's the most work for us and probably gives us the longest timeline. I suspect if we gathered information from those firms that people wanted to go with that, this timeline could perhaps be somewhat shortened with less work for us. I'm happy to take that on, making those calls if someone wants me to, and if there's specific firms other than Eaton Peabody, I would like to know the names other people would want me to reach out to. I feel okay personally about doing this internally, having watched the school do it 3 times, and feeling like I'm not super psyched to spend money necessarily on a big fancy, you know, you said the top of the line ones. I don't know what they cost, but I can gather that information, but I'm open to that. If that's what the rest of council wants, I'm happy to make the calls. So I'll just stop talking and let you all talk.
And I don't think that running a search ourselves limits us to candidates from the state of Maine either. You know, we have access to internet resources that can broadcast ads nationally if we're thrifty and are willing to put in the work. So I do like the idea of getting some quotes and seeing what services would be available to us and at what price point so that we can make an informed decision. But I think it's great that we, you know, already have the like, well, if we're DIYing it, here's how that works. Etched out to look at too.
Including like the service level we get from MMA where.
Yeah.
Cause you know, with Brian's document, you know, reminded me, oh yeah, everyone that's on the committee needs to sign the NDA. This is stuff that can talk about.
Yeah.
You know, because people are,
Yeah.
livelihoods are on the
I
line.
put that all in.
Those little things are, yeah, that's what, that was good about that document, that
Mhm.
helps with that. What I don't know is if, like, if there's anything like as far as communicating with applicants or, you know, if there's anything that MMA could do on that front or does on that front or has the kind of script basically on, so we're not saying the wrong things, and that's would be good to understand what we get from them for the
Yeah.
free, and then again, if there's, it's a la carte with the attorney search firms or whatever they are. I think that's great if you're willing to do that. Yes, sir, Mitch.
I only bring this up. Certainly you do whatever you want to do, but understand that staff is very, very limited on time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
Last time that-
absolutely.
The last time that the search was held, the assistant town manager kind of led the stuff. There will be no assistant town manager. There may be an executive assistant, so I'm not sure what level you need staff help, but I think all those things fall in and with the DIY version, you're
Mhm.
probably gonna need staff help, and I don't know that there is much, if any.
I did ask that, I asked Brian about that from the school perspective. There was extremely limited staff help. It was really simply things that went out to the community broadly by email and social media and that kind of thing. And the council, the school board ran all of that internally through the school board members.
Which they probably, you know, they have their, not listserv, but they have the list of
Parents,
parents.
for us, it would be things that need to go out, the library list and the Parks and Rec list and every other list that we have. So it would be work on Pete, is who primarily, right, who that would fall on. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I'm asking, is that, I mean, correct? Yeah.
if it's communication stuff, yes, but I mean, collecting all the, I mean, I'm assuming you're mailing this all someplace, it's all gonna be collected, given to you in a way that you can handle it. I mean, there is some lifting there. It
Right,
doesn't
and
just-
that's kind of the piece where I wonder what we can
Right.
get out of MMA. to
Yeah.
And if it's not MMA,
appreciate that
yeah.
input.
Good point. Yeah, that's, yeah.
maybe it's. Maybe it's a temp hire to help with administrative support for the search, because you know. You're a
Yeah.
powerhouse, Sarah Marks,
Mhm.
all in favor of that, right? I mean, but at the same time, you're gonna need.
Yeah.
You may need some administrative support and the council may need to step up, if it's not a law firm or if it's not a,
Mhm.
you know, a. Top of the line search firm.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a really great point that we want to make sure that that we have a plan for how to not overwhelm people at the front desk processing mail as part of this and make sure that that's accounted for.
Who else do you all want contacted? And then I didn't want
I
to
have-
contact
I have-
anyone, including MMA, because I didn't think I was officially.
I have a few, just from looking around at searches that have been done, I just did a little research on a couple of the firms that have done those searches. I don't have them off the top of my head. Just send it to you. And I'm not advocating for the luxury version. I'm just saying that you know, we should consider like soup to nuts, what we want.
Yeah.
The one thing that I would want help on is facilitating great community conversations. And maybe that doesn't require a search firm, maybe that requires a facilitator.
Are you looking at
Hire
me?
Sonia, who's highly trained in
I
this.
do that a lot.
So
Highly trained.
that really is that's the area where I feel least comfortable.
And we're,
You know,
yeah, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
So we've got, like, some searches are clearly confidential right up until the job's off.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, saw that Freeport, you know, we didn't, you know, I don't think anybody, other searches are, you know, in the university, again, back to the universities, I've experienced there, sometimes they run them and you know, it's just the last few candidates who have to come in. You know, the committee's not gonna tell, you know, if 40 people apply, you know, that's not all gonna be public. But if it's a priority for us to bring 3 finalists in and have that great community conversation, we have to be upfront with them as part of that, and it's I'd like to have that, I would like to have the community meet the candidates, but that could preclude some candidates from coming forward who don't wanna be publicly
Yeah.
outed that they're in a search.
I would like that too, and I was thinking back to the superintendent, we had several come, but I was also thinking about. Again, people, not everyone, I don't wanna marry to that process to the point that we get people not applying, that would be good fit, so I think we have to sort of. That would be, that would be the expectation, I think, that we try to do that if there's circumstances that say, okay,
Yeah.
I can't let, you know, I can't let it on the bag that I'm looking for a job, that I think we need to be flexible enough to honor that too, so I don't.
Yeah.
What were you thinking, like, we gotta wed to that process, or?
I don't, you know, I mean, it's easy when you're not applying for a job to aspire to what, you know, how the candidate should communicate with us and where they currently work and those kinds of things. So I think more and more you're getting advice from search firms to not have to be, you know, to have like a hybrid approach where you have the search committee sign the NDA and then 3 candidates come meet the search, but then the town of Orono doesn't get a chance to, and I would really like to get to the point where the finalists get a chance to be, you know, introduced to the town, get to meet the town. And I think it'd be helpful to them too. I mean, you know, if we're looking for a leader for this community, I think they would want to be able to openly come into our community and get to know people, so they get a sense of whether this is the right fit for them too, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to be aspirational on that stuff when, you know, you're not the one looking for a job.
So Leo, you're suggesting that we would, right, you're suggesting that we would say, this is our ideal world, and if you feel like you can't accommodate this, let us know, and we'll
Yeah, I mean.
talk to you from.
Would is that something we advertise up front in the process, I guess? I more feel like that's gonna be a decision of, okay, we've got it down to 3 people that we really think would be a good fit. We would like to have a public thing, and if you're right, and if one can't, I don't think you can do it with the other 2. That's the trick.
I worry that you can't make that decision. You get, I think you have to
Make it upfront.
have to make the decision to start
Mhm.
and just set that expectation. And I don't know, you know, there could be some really great candidates who need to pursue new job opportunities under the cover of, this doesn't sound right, quietly for reasons that they may have. But boy, I'd really like to find a candidate who's willing to come and spend some time at Taco Rita and, you know, meet Belinda and everybody and.
I don't think it's gonna be a taco Rita.
You know, well, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So is there something that stops us from advertising that way to start? And then depending on quality of applicants and number of applicants we're getting in, deciding to broaden and advertise a second time? I believe the school did that at least once, where they advertised once and then re-advertised. They were in a situation where they had an interim manager who was eligible to apply for the permanent job. And because of that, people actually thought that it was probably an already, you know, decided deal and didn't apply, and they rewrote the ad in such a way to make it clear that it was actually a wide open search. So I think the school has had that where they've had to advertise a second round, depending on what comes in.
And we may find ourselves in a position where we have to do more than. Like, we're working in an environment, labor shortage environment where we really have to sell Orono to applicants, right? So that may involve more than developing an advertisement.
And I wonder if in the original ad, it says like, send your, resume and confidence to, or if those things are, if that's the type of language that's used, I think we have to honor the confidence until we don't, and we can try to steer the process, but I do think with, the dearth, I'm sure that's out there, we want to, I want to cast the wider net, although that said, they said, well, they used a professional firm down in Freeport and got 100 and something resumes allegedly, they said, but, then they chose our man. I don't, so.
I did ask some details of some folks who've worked with their professional firms a bit, not in a town manager search, but in other context. And I do think those numbers are, I don't know if I like to say this, but they are not necessarily people who actually sent in resumes and officially applied in all settings. That could have been in Freeport, I have no idea, but different firms report that differently. A lot of times that just literally means the number of people they've contacted about the job who answered the phone, even if all they did was answer the phone and say, I'm not interested, I'm gonna refer you to so-and-so and so-and-so, that counts. So I don't know how that firm, counted, and I'm not saying anything about that, but those numbers may not be.
I personally would like to leave it off the table at the outset and not limit ourselves. If we get inundated.
Right.
Great. But
I think it could be a question we ask in the survey. How is important to you? Is it that our search conclude with a candidate's, meet the candidate's experience?
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Of allowing that to be something that the public weighs in on, and if it's a high value and staff as well, like how important is it for the candidate to meet?
Yeah.
Have all of our staff members to have an opportunity to meet the candidate as part of a search, and if that we hear back that that's really important, then that's information that I would want to take really seriously.
Yeah, and I think it'd be tough to change to make a determination
Yeah.
on, as we go. But I mean, you can promise to keep everyone confidential until the final round, but it's.
I think my higher value is on like participation rather than candidate confidentiality just going in, and then, as Sarah said, we can re-advertise in different ways as needed as we go through this process, but I don't want to walk into it with a sort of scarcity mindset that I'm not sure we need. I think that if we lead with our best selves and with an ethos of sort of community participation that we want to have in this town, then hopefully that will attract the right town manager who we're going to want to hire here. So.
And maybe if we, as Leo and Sarah have conversations with MMA and other firms, we'll get some guidance from them on, their best practices, their success stories and challenges and things like that. That may help us refine what we do.
Yeah.
Maybe going back to the interim issue for a second, that may be one of the questions. What kind of flexibility do you have on the, joking aside about the 36-month search process we're gonna go through, maybe, if it's February.
I'm not gonna make it
right?
36 weekends, so.
Council can be named later at the voters, but we need to know what kind of flexibility they have to extend beyond, if we're saying February in this document, which I think is great, but ambitious.
Right, this document is the tightest timeline that I think we can do this on if we run this internally ourselves.
Yep.
And that has us starting on November 6th and not ending this process until week of February 5th. So that is still a 3-month time period.
Yep.
I don't think it's possible to do for us, if we run it ourselves, really any faster than this, from my looking at the various steps. That's why I brought this, for people to see, like, this is what I think is the tightest one. And I have some questions of some places where I'd like to ask, even if that needs to be stretched at some points. I do think that you'll see that on November 13th on this schedule, I had us finalizing a survey to the community and staff. That's 2 weeks from now. And that would come back. I tentatively said people had until December 3rd to fill that out. We have a December 4th meeting and we have a potluck on the 3rd. So I felt like the 3rd would be a final push to say to people, hey, if you haven't filled this out, like, fill it out now, scan your QR code, sit here on your phone and do it, you know?
That's great.
So I don't want to close it before the 3rd. I would envision that as something where the survey results are, you know, being tabulated in the Google form right away, and we all can see them as a council ongoing. So that it's not like you get a lot of results dumped on you Monday morning that you have to read before that night. You'll be able to see them as they're coming in. But, you know, that's a tight timeline right there. That's a place where, you know, we could stretch it out. It does mean that we would have input from the staff and from the community by the 4th. And, I had us not drafting, you know, writing a draft advertisement, during that week as the search leads and bringing that back to council to review on the 11th. So we could see the feedback from the community before we finalize the job advertisement. So those things you're saying, like, could we ask the community how important it is to get to meet the candidates? We could ask those things. And we wouldn't have finalized or sent out our ad yet until after that feedback comes in.
Right.
Again, this is really just my stab at a first draft. So like anything anybody doesn't like or things wasn't work, like, just shout it out. I just felt like we needed something to look at to be realistic about what this, you know, is really going to take.
And that's, I guess, down there in the process, but looking at, we had 16 or 17 people, I think, and I think that's a pretty large committee. I don't know if there's any way around it or not, but that's a big interview.
It is the same size as what the school
Right,
did.
and I was on it.
Yeah, you were on it, I know, and so you sat on it and you know, so I'm saying it is the same size. What I put out was me just, again, this is me like spitballing, who maybe should be on this committee. This is not who should be. This is me saying, start thinking about these things because we need to decide as a council who would be on that. You know,
One, maybe a suggestion that I've seen, not in Orono, but in other places is that instead of one sort of super committee, we have, since we know we're gonna do multiple rounds of interviews anyway, is that the overall committee might be all of these people, but we do separate interviews with smaller chunks of the big committee. And then if we have a rubric or a matrix that allows us to compare candidates, then even for those committee members who are not there, right, it's not as daunting as to have 14 people. But I think all of these are sort of predicated on us doing all the work ourselves. And I think there's money well spent and money poorly spent. And we might have some money well spent to get some advice on how to do the best search possible.
Great.
Yeah, I agree too.
Much as we can run Sarah into the.
100% happy to find out what I can in a
So
week.
would
Wonderful.
would you all be amenable for every committee's meeting and every council meeting that we have from here on out to have this search be a standing item on
Yes.
that? Okay.
Maybe even,
Could it be the
the
first
first
item?
item.
Yeah,
Feels
I
to
don't
me like
wanna
it's important
promise
to
that it'd be
keep
the
the ball rolling.
Clearly you don't. Because there are other emergent items, right?
There are.
I don't wanna make a promise that third week in December, this is gonna be the first item, and you know, like,
Yeah.
I don't.
And you wouldn't wanna make, you know, the 29 people that showed up last week for the library
Oh, no.
discussion
Yeah.
to sit.
Yeah, it's a good point. So some flexibility, but yes, I think we can all agree that this is a high priority item for us from here on out.
I wanted to just point out, if you all look at the second page, that I do think a decision we'll need to make is how long we want to run our ad. And I think this is, you know, we'll talk about this if we hire a firm. I'm sure they'll have advice about that. But either way, you know, this is gonna be being run in December,
Mhm.
you know, through to January. So if an ad runs on December 11th and it runs 4 weeks, that takes us to January 8th, but that's also over a holiday time.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that affects things. The school ran their first search over the exact same time period. And this was the timeline, you know, that existed. So I wrote it, but I boldfaced, you know, this is a 4 weeks of running an ad, and you'll see that later I put January 22nd. Says it's a backup date for the previous week, you know, so that if we decided that we wanted the ad to run longer, we could bump this a week down.
Yeah.
The 22nd week was there to say we could bump everything from the 15th week to here if folks felt like that ad needs to run longer, or if we run it for a certain number of weeks and don't see the number of applicants we want and decide that it, needs to be run more broadly and things need to be bumped. But one thing I think is that whatever process we go with, if we're involving a town committee, a larger search committee at all, we do need to finalize dates very early in the process. Because people need to be told if they're volunteering, these are the dates that you're volunteering for. So some looking over this comprehensive, 3-month timeline and getting Leo and I feedback, I think is important before next week. While we do the work to reach out to MMA and Eden Peabody and other groups, if there's problems people see on a timeline, we're gonna have to firm up dates very soon. To make things work, asking the public to participate, and honestly, asking candidates to, know when those dates would be held. So I just wanted to flag that, if people could take a look. And also the other question is, we have to decide if these meetings where we do this work would actually be our regular council meetings, or if they would be on an additional night. Right, it's gonna be hard to keep the regular business of the town going if entire meetings are being taken up, interviewing candidates and spending a lot of time. As you look at some of these meetings, some of these nights are short, but others would be very long. So we should start talking to each other now about what other night of the week works, right, for us, for any of us.
So I think I have to wait until, not that I already want to push your schedule back a week. I have to wait until next week, until you guys have time to do your due diligence with, see what resources are out there, and for me to have more time to look at the schedule and compare it to my calendar and stuff like that. But I think you're right. I don't think we can expect to do interviews on a night when we have councils and committee meetings, but we could probably do some of this work on nights when we have councils and committee meetings.
So I think that's something we need to flag as a council, which ones we want to be on other nights. So Jeff, would you, from the get-go, you're thinking none of these things would get talked about next week on the 6th, the things that were pointed out earlier?
I think we could do 2, our search committee composition.
Yeah.
I think we could talk about 3 and 4. I just don't think we can do number 1, finalize and commit to a timeline, because we may find that our timeline either is somewhat, plastic, given whatever level of help we decide to enlist. So,
So we should add one that says hire or not hire.
Yeah.
Ought to get decided next week, don't you think?
And then like 1 is kind of item B under that, like if we decide not to hire a firm, then maybe it makes sense to commit to a timeline. But if we're going in, the direction of bringing on more support for this, then
Sarah.
we'll want their input on the timeline.
When you say listing interview dates, you don't mean interview with candidates, do you?
Where are you now?
Next week, search leader send out solicitation for search committee volunteers, listing interview dates. You mean like blocks, like windows?
Yeah, the windows of time that volunteers need to keep free. It's hard to ask a community member or a staff member if they want to serve on the committee, if we can't tell them this committee is going to meet 5 times or 4 times, and it's going to meet on Tuesdays, or it's going to meet on, that is information that people need generally to know if it's something that they're available to do.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I got from discussions with folks is that having a clear timeline with dates up front is really important if you're gonna run it internally, to keep things moving along.
Yeah.
And to make sure that people know what they're signing up for, and you don't end up in a process where people volunteer and then discover, that isn't something they
Yeah.
can do, and you haven't taken a different person as a volunteer who could have done that.
Yeah.
Are we committing to these being all night interviews?
Nope, I don't know. You guys can decide. I'm just telling you, I think it's something we'll need to talk about, is dates and schedules pretty early.
Yeah.
And it's totally great with me if this process becomes a whole month longer. I have no opinion. I simply thought it was useful to make the tightest one and say, I don't think we can do it any faster than this, people. And if you want to do it this fast, this is what it would look like, I think.
But this certainly informs the, what we're looking for in an interim, which would be, and I think we are sort of already knew this, but no shorter than 3 months. And hopefully with, some flexibility, and we can get a sense of candidates' flexibility for how long they might be able to be part of the process, so.
That's why I hurried my time this afternoon to try to finish it, to at least have, to, we were talking about interims tonight, to realize that I think this is a significant process, so.
This is really well done. So thank you for.
I did maybe tell a school board member that we might just try and steal the superintendent to, and, you know. But I kid around with school board members, so that's kind of like.
Do we have anything else to discuss about this search process tonight? Knowing that we're gonna revisit every week from here on out. All right.
Can we ask for public comment on this,
Yes,
on
yes,
our
sure.
discussion tonight? Does anyone have comment on? Please.
Paul Smith, taxpayer. You need for this process outside expert advice starting right now. Even if it's only what Maine Municipal can offer. There are serious, obscure pitfalls that amateurs on a do-it-yourself basis in a task like this can fall into so easily. And some of the items discussed tonight raise many of those issues where there are advice that you need from experienced outside experts on this. So if you look for in a search firm, I would highly recommend you contact the search firm that recently filled a manager position for the town of Freeport, Maine. They helped that community hire one of the finest town managers in the state of Maine. I think that's a track record you might look at.
Thank you, Paul.
So public comment was on our next agenda item, but while we're having public comment, Sophie, do we have anything online? And I'm not sure that Sophie can respond.
We do not. Can you hear me?
She could elevate somebody if there was anybody online.
Well, we find out, I wanted to, like, a separate item, are we going to, did we decide we would notice the public meeting, the potluck public meeting? I know there was some concern about that, so I don't know if we could
Yes.
ask. if that happened.
I'll double check on that.
Great, thanks.
There's no one online.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for checking.
The
Right.
potluck.
And also just to say out loud to the public, the potluck is coming. It is Sunday, so it is 6 days from today, November 5th, 4:30 to 6:30. Being jointly hosted by the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Belonging Committee. It should be a really wonderful event. They have some great things planned. So,
Okay, so let's move from our workshop process into our executive session. Before we take a motion to move into executive session, do we expect to take any business, any formal action after our executive session?
no.
Well, our
Are we
executive
looking at
session
resumes?
is to begin to look at resumes, but we certainly are not ready to make an
We won't
offer.
talk
to
about
anyone.
that publicly anyway, so.
Right,
We can, not a point to offer a job. So no,
Right.
what's gonna happen then, Jeff?
so,
Right.
okay. So
Contact people. Got it.
then I would accept a motion to move into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA section 40568 to discuss candidates for the interim town manager position.
So move.
Second. Matt, and we are going in at 6:54 PM. And we're gonna stay right in here, but we're gonna shut off the screens because we're not gonna take any action. Yeah, let's take a 2-minute break.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Right, so we made a flyer. Did we get it already?